Hi theory students. Today we're going to continue our counterpoint studies in first species. In this part, I'll describe the procedures, things to do and things to avoid, as well as some of the guidelines that will help us get a good counterpoint line written to a given cantus firmus. The first thing we do is set up a two-staff system. The cantus will be copied onto one of those staves. To write an upper counterpoint, put the cantus on the lower staff, and vice versa for a lower counterpoint. So for example, if this is our cantus, by setting this up here, I am setting ourselves up for a counterpoint line there, and that's going to be an upper counterpoint. If I wanted to write a lower counterpoint, I would have written this cantus up here in treble staff, which would leave room for a lower counterpoint in bass staff. The counterpoint will start and end on the tonic, just like the cantus. It'll contain all whole notes, and it'll use all consonant intervals with the cantus. We have three kinds of motion at any given change from one measure to another. We can have contrary motion, the two lines moving in opposite directions, similar motion, the two lines moving in the same direction. We can refine that more and say they're moving in parallel if the similar motion has the same interval between them from one note to the next. Or oblique motion. One voice is moving in either direction while the other stays put. Here's what I mean. So in this particular case, if we're moving from there to there, the two lines are going in opposite direction, and that's contrary motion. In this case, the two lines are going in the same direction, they're different intervals, so we just refer to that as similar motion. If I had gone there so that the similar motion had the same interval, here they're both tenths, then I would call that parallel motion, which is a type of similar motion. And finally here, if one part stays while the other part moves, we're calling that oblique motion. When we write, we would like to write a line with a preference for contrary motion over the other types. So there should be more contrary than any other kind of motion over the course of the entire line. You don't want everything to be contrary 100% of the time, but that will be the most common one. We'll also approach the final tonic by step. If the cantus ends 2-1, and most of the cantus examples that we have do, then the counterpoint is going to end 7-1. I'm talking about scale degrees now. In minor, we have to raise scale degree 7, remember, in order to make a leading tone. We're not going to be raising scale degree 7 otherwise in these first species exercises when we have a minor key exercise. And just like the cantus, when we learned what those were like, the counterpoint should be mostly conjunct or stepwise. Leaps should be used sparingly and earlier in the line. Skips are more common, but not as much as steps. Also, when we have a leap, if the leap goes up, we would like to follow it by coming back. If the leap goes down, we would like to follow it by coming back up. In other words, don't follow a leap, which is a large motion, by continuing on in the same direction. We'll try to have a single high point in the line, especially in an upper counterpoint. Also, we should have some changes of direction. The line shouldn't just go up to a high point and then back down to the tonic. Things to avoid. We should avoid having dissonant harmonic intervals between the lines. That would be a second, a fourth, a seventh, any diminished or augmented interval. So here, I can't have these two notes in first species. That's a seventh. And something that's a little trickier, I can't have these two intervals because that's not a perfect fifth, but that's a diminished fifth. We should also avoid dissonant melodic leaps, a seventh, a ninth, or any diminished or augmented interval. So here, we can't go from this F to the B because that's an augmented fourth. Or we can't go from this B down to the C. That's an interval of a seventh. Next, we avoid moving into any perfect consonants in similar motion. So if I have an octave here, that's a perfect consonance. I cannot go into that octave with both parts going up. I can leave that octave in similar motion, and that's perfectly all right. Avoid using more than one oblique motion, that is to say, a repeated melodic note in a single line. We can use oblique motion if we don't have a better solution, but we shouldn't keep doing this too often or the line will be too static. Avoid pairing a leap with a skip or a leap in the same direction. So if one part has a leap, the other part shouldn't have a leap or a skip together with it. Avoid static lines, too much of one note, too much repeating patterns, too wide a range, or other things that disturb the flow and the singability of the line. Learn the ending patterns, the kinds of starting patterns, and then how to connect a good beginning with a good ending to make a complete line. Let's do an example from start to finish. So here's our cantus. The first thing I want to do is make sure I'm beginning and ending on the tonic. Now let's go to the end. Since the cantus ends 2-1, here we're going to end 7-1. Scale degree 7 is B in C major. I'm writing in all the intervals between the two parts. That'll help tell me if I'm on the right track. The next to last note before the B, we don't want anything too far away from the B because we don't want a big leap right before the final notes. So that means I'm either going to be here, which forms a sixth above the E, or there, which forms a third above the E. The B doesn't work well because we don't want that repeated note right before the end. The A won't work because that's a fourth, which is dissonant. Am I going to use the C or the G? I'll find out when I get there from the previous measure. Now let's go to the beginning. I prefer to use imperfect consonances, so a sixth there works well. If I wanted to have a leap in this line, I can do something here that's rather dramatic. Since I have that leap going up, I'm going to come back in the opposite direction to this octave. I'm sorry, that's the A up to F. My bad. Is a sixth. I can come back down for another sixth. And at this point, I don't want too many sixths in a row. So maybe it's not a bad idea to stay there. And at this point, rather than have a big leap right before the end, I'll choose the C. 3 of these in a row is okay. I don't really want much more than that. So my whole line sounds like this. When it's paired with the cantus, we'll do more examples like this in class. That's all for today.